Let's explore the fascinating differences between classical and operant conditioning in behavioral psychology. Both classical and operant conditioning are fundamental mechanisms of learning, but they work in very different ways. Let's start with classical conditioning, discovered by Ivan Pavlov. Classical conditioning is learning through the association of two stimuli that occur together. It involves involuntary and automatic responses that happen without conscious thought. In classical conditioning, a stimulus triggers an automatic brain response, leading to an involuntary behavior. The most famous example is Pavlov's experiment with dogs. Before conditioning, food caused salivation, but a bell meant nothing. After pairing them together, the bell alone caused salivation. A neutral stimulus paired with an unconditioned stimulus eventually produces a conditioned response on its own. Let's understand the key terms used in classical conditioning. The unconditioned stimulus naturally triggers a response without any learning, like food causing salivation. The conditioned stimulus is a previously neutral trigger that causes a response after being paired with the unconditioned stimulus. The unconditioned response is the natural automatic reaction to the unconditioned stimulus. The conditioned response is the learned automatic reaction to the conditioned stimulus. Now let's explore operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner. Operant conditioning is learning through the consequences that follow a behavior. Unlike classical conditioning, it involves voluntary and active behaviors that are consciously performed. In operant conditioning, a voluntary behavior leads to a consequence, which then influences future decisions about that behavior. There are four main types of consequences in operant conditioning. Positive reinforcement adds something good, negative reinforcement removes something bad, positive punishment adds something bad, and negative punishment removes something good. The consequence that follows a behavior directly influences whether that behavior will increase or decrease in the future. Let's summarize the critical differences between these two types of conditioning. Classical conditioning is involuntary and reflexive with stimuli before behavior, while operant conditioning is voluntary and active with consequences after behavior. Let's look at how these show up in everyday life. A classical conditioning example is developing fear of the dentist after associating it with pain. Another example is feeling hungry when you smell food cooking, even before eating. An operant conditioning example is a child cleaning their room to earn an allowance as positive reinforcement. Another operant example is a student studying harder after receiving a good grade. How are learned behaviors maintained over time in each type? In classical conditioning, if the conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus, extinction occurs and the response fades. In operant conditioning, behaviors are maintained through continued reinforcement, where rewards keep the behavior occurring. Both types of conditioning are powerful, but in different situations. Classical conditioning is most powerful for emotional and physiological responses, like fears and cravings. Operant conditioning is most powerful for shaping voluntary behavioral choices and complex actions. In reality, both types of conditioning often work together in complex real-world learning situations. Let's review the key differences between classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning creates involuntary responses through the association of two stimuli. Operant conditioning shapes voluntary behaviors through the consequences that follow them. Both conditioning types are fundamental to understanding how humans and animals learn and adapt their behavior.